Out, now, that's all he said. No hello, no briefing, just those two words like a gavel crashing down. It was my first day at Peterson Academy, the so-called elite flight training school. And before I could even speak, the instructor snatched the flight manual out of my hands and dumped it on the floor like it was garbage. His grin wasn't friendly. It was the kind of grin you only see on a man who enjoys tearing people down. One flick of his wrist and my coffee went flying, splashing across my white shirt while the entire room laughed. Phones were out, recording. One guy whispered, "Bet she burns toast too," and another shouted, "Mixer's in aisle 5, sweetheart." My application was tossed straight into the trash without a glance. According to the instructor, combat jets weren't for domestic soldiers. And according to his twisted version of science, women lacked the depth perception and resilience needed for real flight. That was it. That was their argument. Case closed. But I didn't flinch. I didn't blink, and I sure as hell didn't cry. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket, brushing my fingers against the weathered pilot wings my grandfather pinned on me before he died. His last words still burning in my head. "You'll fly higher than I ever did, Mac." That memory, that was my armor. That was my fuel. What they didn't know was that they'd just picked the wrong woman to humiliate. My name is Mackenzie Torr, 32 years old, MIT engineer, Air Force vet, 4th generation military, and every single day, I watched jets scream off the San Diego runway from my tiny apartment window, coffee in hand, heartbeat sync to the roar of engines, imagining myself in the cockpit. After I left the Air Force, I worked for North Star Aerospace, designing the very systems these hotshots trained on. But watching wasn't enough. Designing wasn't enough. I wanted to fly. Peterson Academy turned me down 3 years straight. Funny thing is, they only gave me a call back when I submitted my name as M. Torr. No first name, no gender, just letters. They thought I was a man. The irony burned. They had no idea I'd worked on the F-47's internal flight calibration systems, in classified military ops. No idea that I probably understood that jet better than the men standing at the front of that classroom barking orders. No clue that the wings inside my jacket weren't just metal. They were a promise, a bloodline, a legacy. So, yeah, I got thrown out. But I came back, next morning, fresh shirt, legal paperwork in hand, and this time, they couldn't stop me. Not without violating protocol. That's when Ryan snapped. The has-been pilot who now wore an instructor badge like a second chance. "Didn't realize you were applying for secretary," he muttered, just loud enough to get the boys laughing again. That's what they did. Guys who had washed out trying to drag down anyone who hadn't. The mockery followed me everywhere. At the Afterburner bar, Ryan raised his glass and introduced me like a punchline. "This one thinks she's gonna fly an F-47. The crowd howled. Even my neighbor Bill, who worked third shift at the base, would scoff in the elevator. "Simulators, worth more than your entire salary," he said one day, smirking like he was doing me a favor. If I ever mentioned that I helped design those simulators, his eyes would glaze over and he'd hit me with that smug line. Designing and flying aren't the same thing. That's why men are pilots and women serve drinks at 30,000 feet. Yeah, that happened. But what none of them knew, what they still don't know, is that I wasn't just there to prove a point. I was there to finish something that started a long time ago, long before any of them ever stepped foot in a flight suit. They threw me out once, but they never realized the storm they let in the second time I walked through those doors. Even a simple grocery run wasn't safe anymore. I was wearing my academy jacket, just grabbing eggs, and a little girl tugged her mom's sleeve, eyes wide with awe. "Mommy, look, she's a pilot." I smiled until her mother pulled her away and said, without even lowering her voice, "Not for girls like us, baby." That hit harder than every insult flung my way in the academy halls. Because it wasn't mockery, it was surrender. Taught from birth. Week 1, they made their message loud and clear. My desk was decorated with lipstick graffiti and spatulas duct taped to the seat. Someone slid a cookbook under my chair like it belonged in my syllabus. My manuals? Half the pages were missing. When I asked the front desk, the secretary didn't even flinch, just smirked and said, "Did you check the women's bathroom? The guys might have stashed them there." Leadership? That went to Brad Wilson. Barely half my flight hours. When I asked why, the instructor gave me that dead-eyed look and muttered, "Nothing personal." Brad's version of leadership was barking orders and pushing admin work onto me. Every mission brief, every maintenance form. Simulator training rolled around, and while the guys ran standard scenarios, mine loaded with full-scale chaos. Electrical, failure, fire alarms, hurricane crosswinds, they were waiting for me to break. But I didn't. I stayed calm, solved every malfunction like the engineer I am, and walked out with a score higher than half the class. The response? Taylor just got lucky, the instructor said. We'll do a retest. That's how it always went. Emergency training? No one wanted me as a partner. One guy even laughed, "If I pass out mid-flight, I'd rather die than let her save me." So I practiced on a maintenance dummy while they joked it was probably the only guy who'd stick around. Week 3, the bullying went from subtle to cruel. Then came the call from Colonel Peterson, the Academy's top brass. "You're a disruption," he said, eyes cold. "Maybe transfer to the passenger program. It's less intense." Then I aced the aerodynamics exam. A perfect 100. They accused me of cheating, dropped my score to a barely passing grade and told me to consider it mercy. That wasn't the worst of it. Aviation blogs started buzzing. Cockpits and quotas, they called it. No names, but they used a blurred image of me walking across the tarmac, dragging my duffel bag behind me. They said standards were being lowered for diversity optics. Then a video dropped online. Spliced clips showing only my worst moments in the simulator, stall-outs, shaky landings, nothing of the recovery, the fixes, the wins. The comments were vicious. "Would you trust her with your life at 35,000 feet? My mom called me crying that night, begged me to come home, told me it wasn't worth it. The Alumni Association issued a statement threatening to cut their funding if the Academy didn't return to traditional standards. And then the FAA stepped in, not to investigate the harassment, but to audit me alone, no other cadet. One-on-one observation in every drill, every test, every breath. And then, just when I thought I could push through it, I got a letter. "Your tuition is short by $5,000. Pay in 48 hours or your slot is terminated." I had no choice. Took out a high-interest loan just to stay. And halfway through the program, they changed the fitness standards, added new physical tests that had nothing to do with flying a plane. It wasn't about safety. It was about survival, their version of it. But I trained harder. Ran until my legs went numb. Stayed late after everyone left, whispering into the darkness, gripping my grandfather's wings like they were the last, tether holding me up. Not after coming this far, I told myself. Not now. At night, I'd watch the jets lift into the sky, tail lights fading into blackness, and I'd tell myself, one day it'll be me, not just up there, but unshakable, untouchable, and undeniable. Finals came, and only the top 3 cadets were cleared to fly the F-47. Whoever ranked highest would walk away with a job offer. Despite my scores and simulator performance, I was placed 4th. Brad, Travis, and Michael, Peterson's favorite, were chosen. That night, while replaying my flight path in the simulator alone, I overheard Colonel Peterson and Captain Reed discussing a known stabilizer flaw in the F-47, the very issue I'd personally fixed during my time in the Air Force. But my fix had been buried because it came from a junior female engineer. I stepped in and told them flat out, "You can't send them up without warning them. I designed the fix." That's when they realized I was the M. Taylor in the archived files. After a tense exchange, they allowed me to fly, not as a competitor, but as a technical consultant. One chance, no second tries. The next morning, the airfield buzzed with executives, media, and Academy brass. Travis played it safe. Michael was flashy, but nothing exceptional. Then Brad took off and started pulling risky stunts, climbing right into the red zone, above 32,000 feet, exactly where the flaw triggered. I saw the numbers spike on the monitors. The jets started spinning. No hesitation, I grabbed the radio. "Brad, it's Taylor. Manual override. 40% thrust. Left rudder, not right. The computer's wrong." Silence. Then his voice crackled back. "Override engaged. Thrust at 40. Left rudder." He leveled out, barely, and landed rough but alive. The entire crowd froze. Peterson turned pale and said, "Get in the backup jet. Show us." I flew. Calm. Confident. I triggered the instability on purpose, then recovered using my fix and took the aircraft through complex maneuvers none of the others attempted. When I landed, it was dead silent. Then applause broke out like a wave. The chief engineer from the manufacturer walked up and asked, "How did you know?" I said, "Because I'm the one who wrote the fix. It's been sitting in your files this whole time." Everything shifted. Peterson admitted their evaluation system was flawed. The Academy announced a new scholarship for women in aviation, named after my grandfather. The FAA offered me a special advisory role. The jet manufacturer gave me a job as both lead engineer and test pilot, at double the salary. At graduation, Peterson personally pinned my grandfather's wings to my uniform, but I didn't push to get anyone expelled. I said, "Let them live with what they did, and grow. That's how change begins. 6 months later, I led the first all-female test flight of the upgraded F-47. Soaring above the academy while young girls watched from the observation deck, their eyes wide with possibility. And as the sun dipped low over the runway, I thought about the long road here. Every insult, every dismissal, every test meant to break me. But I didn't break. Because sometimes the loudest revenge isn't a scream, it's silence filled with awe. So now I ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have forgiven them? Or clipped their wings for good?